Howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast 210. I pray you're all staying safe and sound, doing well. A couple of my friends just got over COVID, and two more friends just started it. So please take care, wear that mask, use common sense. Let's get past this thing so we move back to the passions that really turn our world. I want to thank you for taking time to stopping in and listen. It means a lot to me. You guys have had some really just heartfelt comments in the last 2 weeks. And I want you to know that even though I don't always respond to every single one of those, because they're kind of like open-ended comments, they do mean a lot. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for sending them. Also want to thank my good friends at Bedford Camera, bedfords.com. I know they've been really busy of late this last week with the announcement of the Z6 II and Z7 II, people getting pre-orders in. Pretty cool stuff. A lot of questions came in. Once I have the cameras in my hands, I'll have more for you. But at the moment, yes, the Z6 II, as I've already ordered. And why, I will explain in the future time. But thank you, Bedfords. Thank you guys for all supporting us. Appreciate it. And Bedfords, remember, you sit there and use that code MOOSE. Get yourself a discount, save some shipping and tax. It's the place to buy your gear. Well, let's get right to this week's topic, the tool collector. Now, I could really be pointing this conversation towards a lot of people, but pointing towards myself. So I had a great weekend here at the ranch and had 4 projects I had to get done. 2 of them were woodworking projects. For those who don't know, I'm into woodworking, build furniture, all that stuff. Have since I was 9 or 10 years old, for a long time. Now, I was working on Sharon's new hothouse and had to sit there and I was doing some angle joints for the top roof, had a bevel. I said, I can set the table saw. I said, you know what? I got a router bit for it. Went to the cupboard, pulled out the router bits. They were shiny, brand new, never used. Sat there and looked on a date, because I always date my tools when I got them, especially if they have an edge that might need to be sharpened. They've been sitting in my cupboard unused for 20 years. 20 years. Talk about tool collector. Now, when I was in Mammoth there, I had a shop, but it wasn't very big, and I had to always expand it out to do what I wanted and then put it back because I had limited space, which is not the case at the ranch. So I've been tackling things to be dealt with and built. And I'm sitting here looking at, and when I pulled out those router bits, it stopped me in my tracks for a second. And I go, man, I got a problem here. And I start looking around the shop at these tools that I've collected for decades. Okay, not just a year, months, decades. That for some unknown reason, way back when, I said, I need to buy this very expensive tool and then put it on a shelf for a couple of years or 20 in the hopes that I might need it someday. Because I guarantee you, when I bought those router bits 20 years ago, I had no idea I'd be at the ranch in Montana building Sharon a hothouse for her plants to overwinter in. Well, then I sat thinking about some photographers who I know. One couple, he is a really nice guy, but he has a boatload of gear. I mean, I talk about myself having a gear locker, which since I make my money from my profession, I have lots of tools in that locker. This gentleman made me look like a two-timing, first-timer kind of thing. He had unbelievable amounts of gear. When I went to his home the one time, went into, for lack of better terms, a walk-in vault where all the Nikon gear you can imagine was laid out in shelves in custom die cut foam in a drawer that would pull out. It was a thing of beauty. You know, the carpentry of all this and the thought, and then of course all that glass. And then I said, hey, this stuff is amazing. Can I see some of your photographs? Oh, I don't take pictures. And I said, what? He goes, well, not like you do. I take a picture of my dog and the kids at graduation. But I said, well, what do you got all this stuff for? Because it's just cool. And I have to tell you, if I could, I would have a lot of gear sitting here because it's cool. And I've told other people this. If I had the money, I would have on a tripod with some incredible lighting going on and this beautiful, gorgeous walnut kind of case. You walk in the room, you hear a ta-da, and on this tripod would be a 120 to 300 Nikkor lens with a D6 on it, because I just think it's the most incredibly gorgeous set of engineering, let alone camera gear, that I've ever seen. But the reality is, I'm not going to sit there and spend the money to have that in those lights. And I love my wife, and she loves me, but she ain't going to let me have it either. But that's what I'm talking about, this tool collector. I mean, I've had a number of Zoom conversations of late with folks who have a lot of camera gear. And they sit there and email and go, hey, can we do one of your consultations? I need to talk about camera gear. I've got too much. I want to buy some more. And it's like, okay, you've got too much and you want to buy some more. Yeah, that's a tool collector I've ever heard one. And we get on Zoom and we go back and forth and we go through what they have. And there's a lot of things tools that aren't moving their photography forward. That's really the goal here, is not to let the gear get in our way of moving forward, not letting our gear be the excuse like happens so often. It has to be the gear. It can't be me. That's why the picture sucks. Getting past that and not being a tool collector is a big part of that. I have one dear friend, I love him to death, but we were counting up, and he had, if I remember correctly, I could have this backwards, but he had either 8 24mm lenses or 11 85mm lenses, or vice versa, 11 24 and 8 85s. Now, not just 85-1.8 and 85-1.4, but he had lenses that incorporated those two focal lengths, 24 and 85. And he had that many. And I said, hey, why? And we had this long 2-hour drive, and it was an interesting conversation, at the end of which he said, and within about 45 days, he had sold a lot of the glass that was basically duplicating that same focal length and cutting down his kit to where he had just the tools he needed, and he wasn't just collecting tools. Now, I should say what tools are. To me, camera gear, in a large part, is a tool. It's a tool that allows us to take our passion, our storytelling desire, and focus that on a subject and bring that all back in a click to share with others. That's what the camera, the lens, the filters, the post-processing, all of that. They're strictly a tool for us to express the incredible joy we have being alive and seeing the world we get to see and witness. Because not everybody is that fortunate. So these tools. Now, when it comes to camera gear, I'm not guilty of collecting tools because it's a business. I also have 2 people watching, that expenditure, the money going in, the money going out, my wife and the accountant. The wood shop, well, that's a whole nother ball game, right? But here's the deal. Because of the eyes watching the photo gear, after all these decades, I've been kind of, I want to say trained, but that's really the word for it, to sit there and watch the expenditures. So I'm sitting here building out the wood shop slowly because I'm got the space, like I mentioned, and I love working in wood. It's just another way of expressing, the things I like to do, and I like the mechanical math part of it. But when I have to buy a tool, I instantly go back to the photographic side of me, and I go, well, this tool, will it do this, this, and this, or only that? In other words, do you need a 24 to 200, a 24 to 72.8, a 24-1.4, a 14-24, and a 14 to 30, which incorporates 24? That's 5 lenses. Or can 1 or 2 lenses do the job for you? Do you need to have all of those different blades for the table saw? Or can you just make this one and the other and then make your own spacer to do a dado cut? I mean, you've got to figure out where you could draw the line. Because the flip side is when you have too many tools, you always sit there and stop. At least I'm speaking for myself. I should speak for myself. When you have too many tools, you go, should I select this tool or that tool? Or maybe if I don't like those two, select this tool. So rather than making the first idea and making that tool work for me, I then have the excuse of it could be other tool and other tool. So if it doesn't work out, it ain't my fault. It's the tool's fault. Rather than having that one tool, use that one tool over and over and over again until I perfect that tool. And then I can say, okay, this tool, it does or does not work for the way I want to tell a story. So tool collecting, it's... that guy that had that whole cupboard, vault, I should say, of gear. Here's the funny part, to finish that story off. He and his wife were with me on a photo adventure. This is a long time ago. This is back in the days of film. And whenever we stopped to take a shot, they both had the exact same lens and body. I'm not making this up. I have some pictures to show it. He's got a 400-8. She's got a 400-8. They both have a 1.4 on an f5. They did not share. They had their own setup. And they were identical. When we got out and they both had 200 micro, my jaw dropped. I wanted 200 micro. I couldn't afford one. These folks had 2. That's a tool collector when you've got a his and a her set and they couldn't share. Now, what are the odds they both had the exact same identical storytelling ideas, passion, and concept to go and shoot with the same lens at the same time, the same subject? Well, if you're shooting a 200 micro, right? I mean, how much space is around a mushroom to take a picture, right? If you're photographing a moose or a caribou, that's one thing. But to have, you understand what I'm saying here? These tools are very specific, a 400, 500, 600. And we could all have the exact same lens and point them at the exact same subject, but we'd all have different stories. But to have so many tools that you have a his and a hers, that's tool collecting. I'd much rather see folks use their hard-earned capital on, rather than collecting tools, getting out and shooting. Because in that process, you'll use the tools you've got. You'll figure out what you don't need. You'll sell those off. And then you'll buy the ones you figure out you do need. And that moves your photography forward. And that's really the point here. Use that capital you work so hard for to spend more time behind the tools you have, and then you'll know how to use those tools. You make the most of it. You'll get rid of the tools that don't do anything for you and buy the ones that mean something. You don't want to be a tool collector. You want to be a story collector and a story sharer. That's really what makes this whole thing called the world turn around, is your stories and sharing them, folks. So I hope you have a great weekend. Hope you have a great week. And remember, every time you go out shooting, make every click your story.